Well, I think I really should get started because, you know, we've given people a chance to log in, get their cup of tea and log in. Obviously, more people may join us and we'll let them in as they come. So, morning, I'm Hilary and I work for the Croydon Almshouse Charities. And part of that is Croydon Relief in Need, which is the funding opportunity that we have here at the Almshouses. I have a couple of PowerPoint slides that we'll go through, and essentially it's giving you an outline of how the fund works, looking at some examples of what's being funded and the priorities, a little bit about the key questions in the application, and then an opportunity for questions around things. If it remains a small group, that's good, because then you can ask some specific things related to your project. What I would normally say is, but of course we can follow on that conversation. But hopefully you saw my email from yesterday, just flagging up that I'm leaving the organisation, unfortunately. I will still be in Croydon. I will be doing freelance work with the community sector. So you'll see my name popping up with different training and funding activities. So I'm always happy to have a conversation with people. But in terms of my actual role here, I'll be finishing. And it just wasn't quite clear how they wanted to proceed and what they decided the best thing to do. And what I've advised is that there won't be a funding round in July. There will be one more funding round this year, and that will be in October. And the remaining funds for this year will be distributed at that point. So what I'm expecting is that more people will apply in the October round, but there will be more money that they will be making sure they've got all of it distributed, because that's our aim always, is to make sure it all gets out there. So I'm sorry if that interferes with people's times and sort of scheduling in the way that you were thinking, but just in terms of the charity here, that's the best way for them to manage that and make sure that it works smoothly. All right, let's move, just make sure I've got everyone here. And hello, is that Deborah?
It is, yes. I'm sorry.
It is Deborah.
A few problems with my computer. So.
Welcome. Okay, so let me just share. Share, that's what I'm trying to do. It's only been like how many years? Okay. So here we are, Croydon Relief in Need, 14 charities in Croydon. As I say, we'll look at how the fund works, some of the things that have been funded, key questions, and I'll just run through last year's grants, which I think helps to demonstrate how it works really. So normally there are 4 meetings each year. This year there'll be 3 meetings. So we've already had 2, and they've distributed just over half of the £200,000. So there's about £92,000 left to distribute this year. It is a wonderful resource for Croydon, but it's amazing how quickly you can spend £200,000. So many great projects, and there has been, as you can imagine, a lot of interest in the funds. Sometimes what happens is the committee are the ones that make the decision. They're looking at the applications and making those decisions. They really want to fund everyone. So the difficulty with that is sometimes they're making decisions about, well, you've applied for £10,000, but can you manage with £5,000? So it's quite a flexible fund. which is great, but also that leads to you needing to be flexible. So it's worth bearing that in mind. You know, what is it that we really want? What can we also usefully do with this money, and just sort of, you know, be thinking about that right at the start, I think. So £200,000 to distribute. This money comes from the investments of the Alms House. It's amazing when you put money away in 1447, it's amazing the interest you get in 2022. So we're very lucky. This is the Alms House funding. The directors, the trustees are the ones who decide how to distribute that. We're not answerable to local government, central government, anywhere else apart from us as a charity and the Charity Commission. So again, back to that kind of the flexibility around it. We're the ones who set the priorities. These are our priorities. Older people's projects, so we talk about 60 plus. Young people's projects, people under the age of 25, and reducing poverty, particularly focused on projects that are in areas of deprivation within the borough. I've just listed here a few projects just to give you a feel that that we don't explicitly say no large national organisations, and we do sometimes fund Croydon projects for large national organisations, but there is a focus on Croydon projects. There is a focus on the connections to Croydon. So in the application form, which hopefully people have already had a look at, if not, you can download it from the website. I mean, we've always tried, and I've also had a go at it to try to make it really relevant, very specific about what you're doing, you know, not too onerous, but you do need to get across to the committee who you are, what you want to do, and why you're the best people to do it. So, you know, you've got to think about those opportunities within the questions. And so here where it talks about what does your organisation do, outlining your aims and activities, but it's also, you know, giving a feel to your organisation. So, you know, the sense of your size. How many volunteers do you have? How many paid members of staff do you have? You know, Chris, you're talking about the number of bookings at the campsite. You know, just giving that idea of, well, actually, we've had bookings from over 100 different organisations so far this year, and you know, 90% of those are Croydon organisations. So showing those connections within Croydon. The committee is made up of Croydon residents. I was when I started here, I was very impressed by their knowledge and understanding of the borough, of organisations within the borough. You know, you don't need to go into detail, particularly. You don't need to spend a lot of your words talking about Croydon Borough. They know Croydon Borough. They live here. They want to know about you and your project and the difference it will make. There now, description of your project, you know, what is it that you want to achieve and how do you plan to do it? So this, we talk about projects that hopefully people have picked up that, you know, we do fund core costs, we'll call it core costs or development costs. You know, what is it you want to achieve? It might be an IT project. It might be, we need funding to replace all our computers and get a new database. So, you know, that's, sorry, one moment. Sorry, someone knocked on the door, right, where was I? Yeah, so it might be an IT project, you might need to, you know, get new computers, new networking, new database, new videoing equipment for your online sessions. That type of project, is certainly something that we have funded similar types of things in the past and could do in the future. What difference will it make? It's sometimes going to the negative here can be quite interesting. So what happens if it doesn't get funded? In terms of the impact on your organisation. If we stick with that IT example, if we don't get funding to update our IT, we just become more and more obsolete. Our ability to deliver just disappears, and again, sometimes talking about the implications for the group can be quite useful way of thinking of it. Of course, then you flip it around to, well, what are the benefits to individuals? What are the benefits to the organisation? What are the benefits to the local area that you're working in? The difference that will happen, and of course, thinking about impact of the funding and how far that goes. What's the lasting benefit? Is there, if the committee are say, right, okay, yes, we want to fund this because it's going to have an ongoing impact with something. And again, you can see how that's quite interesting when I picked on that IT project. Funding 10 sessions of chair-based Tai Chi, great, that's really useful. But funding you to have a promotion campaign to reach organisations and individuals in a certain area. Lasting benefit, actually, your organisation's ability to deliver more is a longer term benefit. So there's different ways to think about it. Measurable outcomes is a question that we have now in our application form. So the way we state it is, please provide between 1 to 3 measurable outcomes. This is what you will be monitored on if successful with the grant. This is where, if I suggest to you, just have a bit of a thought about, well, if I say this, if I make an application for £10,000, and actually the committee, and here are my measurable outcomes, if the committee come back and say, oh, we really want to spread the money, what could you do with £5,000? This is where you need to have that flexibility and be able to think, well, what can we do with that £5,000? Is there something that can still be delivered in a successful way? If so, what does that now look like for that reduced amount of money? So I think it's worth playing around with some of those figures. We use outcomes in a very flexible way, trying to not make the form too complicated. So if some of you are more aware of, outputs and outcomes, etc., really it's just something that we can talk to you about in terms of how has it gone. You said you wanted to run 12 fitness classes. Have you managed to run 12 fitness classes? The other way of perhaps looking at it as well, it's more about the change that's happened. So, right, you told us you wanted 20 people to report back that they felt less isolated. Have you managed that? It's not, of course, it's not all about the numbers. It's about the quality. Some of the projects we funded are not working with a huge number of people, but they're giving that real quality and in-depth support. Sometimes it is better, depends what kind of activity you're doing. Sometimes it's about, let's get people through the door and we want these nice big numbers. That's fine, that's you just need to make your case in terms of how the project works and what you're trying to achieve. Have people had a look at the application form? Are there any questions about the application form at this stage? No? Okay. You can see, right. with that. I realise I haven't talked about eligibility yet. So just to run through that, in terms of eligibility, you don't need to be a registered charity. Community organisation is fine as long as it's constituted. So constituted with a committee, some kind of committee. CICs are welcome to apply. So I have found that sometimes CICs don't necessarily have the same in-depth financial information to share. If you're a charity, you will normally have shared quite detailed information with the Charity Commission, which we can then look at. So that sometimes is a question where I just need to go back and get a bit more detail. The reason we're looking for financial information is to demonstrate the sustainability of your organisation. So if we agree to give you funding, will you still be there in a year's time to be able to deliver it? And we're also looking for evidence of past ability to deliver projects. So type of organisation, yeah, there's a bit of flexibility in there. We don't have an income limit. As I've said, we do have a focus on Croydon organisations, but the committee haven't actually set an income limit on that. So they are happy to hear from all types of organisations. The other documents that we will need will be some kind of annual accounts and some kind of annual report. If you're a registered charity, you're submitting those to the Charity Commission. Really easy, you can look them up, there they are. If you're not a registered charity, it depends on what you are producing, but as I say, the committee want to know that history of your organisation. So it doesn't need to be a formal annual report, but it needs to be some kind of evidence of activity. So, you know, there is discussion to be had about that. If you're sitting there thinking, oh, we don't do an annual report, we don't submit that, what can I do? There's plenty that we can do to make sure that the committee have the confidence in you and your organisation, and we can take that, you know, we can look at that on an individual basis. And we'll also need relevant safeguarding policies. So that's the other thing that we asked to. And the last piece of eligibility is we ask organisations that have been funded. So once you finish that funding, you then ask to wait for 1 year before you apply again. So I was just asked about I've just been asked a question about where the application form is. So on our website, you can download the forms there. I will share the website with everyone at the end of the session. All right. Yeah, okay. So just having a look at last year's funding gives you an idea. So you can see, so then the maximum funding that you can apply for is £30,000. Last year, nobody received that amount. If you were to apply for £30,000, normally that would be split over 2, even 3 years. We do sometimes fund people over 3 years, but still with that maximum of £30,000. So here is an example here, KIC, mentoring young people. They've received a grant of £22,000. That's for 2 years, so £11,000 in 1 year and £11,000 in the next year. But some of the larger amounts, you know, you can see there's a one-off payment here that will be made to the Anglican Valley School for their play equipment, and that was just in 1 year. UNAC, so the Upper Norwood Association of Community Care, that's a 2-year project. So again, you know, that amount was split over 2 years. If we look at the type of things that have been funded, it's nice to see because it is quite a big range. So, you know, the emergency packs, that is as it says, the money comes in, those packs are made and distributed. Whereas Croydon MenCat, with that special needs advice and support, that's an individual, that's somebody's wages basically, that are then running training sessions and supporting individuals. We come down to reaching higher. So you can see it's office refurbishment for that, contributing to the office refurbishment for that organisation. Again, we've got sort of short-term things, so holiday activities, and then back up here where again, debt and financial advice, that was extending the hours of the advisors. With music relief, their music activities included purchasing quite a lot of musical instruments, which the committee felt was then really contributing to music relief sustainability, because it was giving those the resources that they would then be able to make use of on an ongoing basis. So those were my slides. That was it. No more than that. Any other questions at this point?
Hilary, are you happy to talk about projects before an application is put in, just to test out whether the ideas sound reasonable or not?
Yeah, well, as I was saying, unfortunately, I won't be here.
Yeah.
So for the immediate interim moment, it will be, the contact will be Hayley James, who is the CEO of this charity. So she has several things on her agenda. So in terms of that, you know, the more in-depth support that I was able to give, that won't be available straight away. I mean, I think it's worth sending Hayley an email, and obviously I'll share Hayley's email with everyone. I think it's worth sending Hayley an email if you have a question around it and want to check that out. So, but what's your thought? Have you got some thoughts around it, Terence? How far have you got with the idea, or are you just checking out?
Well, I was really just checking, you know, checking out. I mean, a lot of ideas around at the moment are about sustainability of organisations that, you know, that have been losing funding as a result of not only the pandemic, but you know, the financial situation in the borough, you know. But I do take the point that the fund, you know, is sympathetic to a contribution towards overheads as part of ideas, so which is a really positive thing, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also trying to give organisations space to develop as well. So, you know, you can build that in to the fund. It's, you know, what's your hope for this money? Well, a part of the hope for this money is that it will give time for our CEO or our fundraiser to, you know, go off and do this. That's fine to put that as part of the project as well. Yes, I mean, it's been a challenge for us here in terms of so much funding lost from Croydon Council. We can't replace that, but what we have tried to do is give people a bit of space so that they can, you know, so we're not losing things unnecessarily as a borough, and hopefully people, you know, have a bit of space and they can and you know, really focus on their strategy, develop their plans and give them a little bit of breathing space to do that. But I think it's right for me to say that the committee will be thinking about the sustainability of an organisation and what happens next as well. So if don't shy away from saying, well, actually, what we need is some time to make this happen.
And the funding round in October, how quickly would you anticipate the trustees making a decision? I mean, is it a very quick turnaround? I mean, presumably after.
Well, interestingly, it may get quicker. There are dates on the website. I can give you a basic I mean, basically, it normally is what's happening at the moment is the committee look at it and make decisions, and those all need to be verified by the full board of trustees, the full board of directors. So there is a bit of a wait between the one committee meeting and the next one, which can be up to 4 weeks.
Right.
And then I think on the website, the date that we've got on there actually gives a little bit of extra time in terms of the communication. I mean, obviously, we try to do it as quickly as possible, but at the moment, that's the kind of holding point is the after the committee meeting, it needs to be verified by the board. They're thinking of maybe loosening that up a little bit to get it moving on a bit quicker. But those are the sort of time scales, that we're thinking about. Anybody else want to mention the project? People got quite a clear idea on what they're looking for. Well, Becca, you were saying you're quite clear about the online activities that you're thinking about. Is it tutor time that is the sticking point for you? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, it's really dependent on how much is available, because I'm on the borders of Norbury, so there is potential of expanding existing property to be able to facilitate in-person sessions for that part of the borough. Obviously, local would be easier for people that live near the surrounding area. But yeah, it all just depends on, obviously, I can put the application in and put the suggestions forwards, and the bare minimum would be just to be able to provide the actual sessions so that they're getting something is obviously better than nothing. And obviously, the more we can offer, the better. So if we can expand on that, great. But, beggars can't be choosers, right?
Oh, please don't make it sound like that. The committee really wants it to be, and we're trying hard to develop relationships and sort of connect people together as well, because that's part of being this resource for Croydon. But you're right. I mean, there is only so much money to go around. That's interesting. You're already beginning to think about different levels of funding and what you could do with that. And I think that is the way to approach it.
It's just this idea of the sustainability that was already mentioned before, and obviously the reliance on funding. If there is a way to get to a point where we can be self-sufficient to provide the services to the community, then that would be the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Yes, and I can imagine having a space.
What we don't want is, it happened several times before, and what we don't want is getting everyone's hopes up and getting things going, and then funding runs out again, and we're back to square one.
Yes, well, that's an interesting point, and there's been a couple of projects where we've not funded them very much each year, but we have funded them a bit for 3 years, so they know that something's coming for 3 years, so they know that they can build around maybe a fairly small set of activity, but some consistency, and I think that can be quite useful. I mean, obviously, the difficulty is every project's different, and everyone has a different sort of way of developing their project. But for me, that does seem quite a useful way to start it. And that when you're going to other funders, you can say, well, we will be doing this, this, and this for 3 years. What else can you help us do on top of that? So that can be quite a good way of approaching it. Yeah, so something to think about in terms of if that works for an organisation. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for adding those thoughts. Anybody else got a particular project that they're thinking of and just want to run it by or run by questions?
Hilary, you said in the email to me that you would talk about this refugee project. I mean, do you want to do that now, or shall I give you a call separately?
Yes, we'll speak about that separately, I think.
Yeah.
If that's right, to sort of go into
Yes.
detail. But you have reminded me that there is something else I haven't mentioned it at all, is that we also can provide one-off grants to individuals. So if people are in need, you as an organisation can apply on their behalf. That is not through an application form. You can just write a letter via email, attached to email, just stating who the person is, what their situation is, a little bit about why they're in need of funding. But we don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of someone's private personal information. If you're working with someone and know someone, and you know that they're in a really, they're in a really tight situation. I'm saying that and rolling my eyes because I think obviously this is going to be more and more across this year. We're going to come up with this, aren't we? Where people that have been managing suddenly aren't managing. So the committee can provide a one-off grant for people, and sometimes that does make such a difference, doesn't it? Just knowing that you've got £200, £300 coming, it can just ease people a little bit. That funding, so as I said, you make the application on behalf of somebody, the funding comes to you that you then pass on to them in whichever way you feel will work. So that could be you just give them, transfer it into their bank account, or it could be that you're buying something for them. Sometimes that's about, getting the fridge that they've never had or have been broken. So do bear in mind the individual applications.
Could I just raise a point about I think about elderly criteria? There may be some organisations, some projects which wouldn't necessarily flag themselves as being an older person's voluntary organisation, but in the reality, 90% of the users of the service are elderly. Are the trustees fairly flexible, or do they really want?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, and so it's. So I guess there's two relevant things around that. They're not going to be saying, right, you must turn away anybody who is under the age of 59. It's about where the focus is on that. There's also the Croydon residents part as well. So this funding, it's probably the strongest point actually. This funding is to be used for the benefit of Croydon residents. And the committee will look at that. So just think about, people are on the border of places. They will have people who are not Croydon residents. Now, that again doesn't mean you have to say, right, this part's funded by Crim, you can't come in. But it does mean the committee need to make a decision on that. So if you have 10 people who are using your service and 8 of them are Croydon residents and 2 of them aren't, the committee does need to think about that because that's in our charitable aims. But just you just need to explain where you are and what you're doing and the kind of numbers that looks like, and of course they understand the reality of working on projects. So that's it. Yeah. Okay. So I think the next thing for me to do is to send you all an email with the just a link to the web page. So it hasn't been updated yet in terms of those dates. So in my email, I'll just remind you that the date now is the October date. The application forms are there. If you, and I will include Hayley James's email. If you do send something to my email, you'll get a reminder to then send it on to Hayley, and so do. So that should be fine. Hopefully nothing will be missed or lost. Yeah, don't think there were any other bits that I needed to say, were there? Just a link to the application form and Hayley's email. Yes, I'm sorry that I won't be able to go into more detail with you in terms of this application and this funding, but I will be around. I've got a few things booked via my old organisation CVA anyway, so if you see me, I'm happy to, of course, I'm happy to have a conversation in relation to this funding as well as all the other things that I like to talk to you about. I am here for the rest of the day. If you've got an immediate question you want to email me today, you can, and I'll try and get back to you. But unless anybody has anything else they want to raise, I think I'll just follow up with those in that email. That sounds okay. Right. Let me just check I've got everyone who's here. Hi, Keisha, where are you? Which organisation are you? Oh, here you are. I see. Motivated by Mother, not an organisation I'd heard of before, so nice to see you there. And we've got Gifty who's here. Brilliant. Good. Okay. Well, thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. No doubt our paths will cross.
Thank you, Larry. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.